Good afternoon and welcome to SBAM Small Business Briefing. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Operations. My normal co-host Brian Kelly is off today, but I have our repeat guest host Kelli Saunders joining us. Kelli, thanks for being here.
Well, thanks, Sarah, and good afternoon, everybody. Kelli Saunders, Vice President of Policy and Engagement at SBAM. And we have quite a full show today because even though there may have been fireworks on the 4th, there were also fireworks in Lansing. So, Sarah, I'll kick it back to you to welcome a new member.
Yes, absolutely. I want to say welcome to one of our new members. They are Elevate Employment Group LLC and owner Jason Herbert. And yes, Kelli, you didn't bury the lead. There were a lot of fireworks over the weekend, including leading up to the 4th with the passage of our state budget. And so that really is going to be the meat of today's show. I know you and the advocacy team spent a lot of time digesting what is and is not in this budget. So I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sarah. And it was a very full week on the 2nd and the 3rd of July. So, just a reminder for everybody, there is a statutory deadline for the budget. Doesn't really have a lot of teeth, unfortunately, that it says it should be done by July 1st. There's numerous reasons why that's the case. Obviously, schools have to plan their budgets for the incoming school year. And so there's been always a lot of pressure for the legislature and the governor to get the budget done so that that planning can be done, but also for, cities, townships, everyone who has to do a lot of their planning when it comes to their respective communities. And so if you recall, actually 9 months ago in October, we were still having this conversation on the budget. There was a little bit of a standoff. When I say little, I'm being kind between the House, the Senate, and the governor on some pretty stark differences in the budget. And so, what's normally done in what could say to be July was not done until October, and that was highly unusual from the last, decade plus in getting this done. And so a lot of people were skeptical. Could they come together? We know that there was going to be a lot of federal money that was going to be running out from the pandemic era, and there were going to be tighter shoestrings essentially here in Michigan. Not to mention that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act also had implications on it that made federal money not as accessible to our state. And so there were a lot of pivots that had to happen. Now, this does play into the speaker's narrative quite well. He's been saying ever since he took leadership almost, well, we'll say a year and a half ago, that the budget was too big and needed to be downsized. There were a lot of programs and projects that had been put into place during the time of COVID when federal money was flowing. So last year, the budget rang in at about 82 billion at the height, 85 to some extent. And so this year, the budget settles in at 75 million, some because it has to. There's not going to be as much money available from the federal government, but also because maybe there's been more scrutiny amongst programs over the last few years, specifically from the speaker. But then also giving the Senate credit too, that they had been evaluating programs and seeing what doesn't work and what does work. How can we essentially build off those successes and maybe start to phase out programs that aren't working, or modify to some extent? The governor had obviously presented her budget back in February. And so since February, the House and the Senate have obviously passed their own versions. And then there was this collaboration that needed to occur essentially between those three parties. As we've said before, it's been a little bit of a challenge before these leaders to work together. They all have very different viewpoints on where a budget should head. And so I will say, given what we witnessed last year, it might be to some semi-miraculous that it's done on July 2nd and 3rd, but it's a good development regardless that it is done so that people can move on. So I set that context because we're going to go over a few different buckets today. And of course, I've invited in my partner in crime, my trusted friend, bestie, if you will, Jacob. And so, Jacob, I'm going to turn this over to you in just a second, but you are a frequent flyer on this briefing as well, as we fill in for Brian, but maybe reintroduce yourself and what you do. And let's kick off this budget discussion talking about something that we have been in tune with the last few years, which is small business supports that we advocate for every day.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Always glad when I'm able to join the program to talk about fun stuff like the budget. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jacob Manning. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Manager here at SBAM. So, along with Kelly and Francesca, we keep eyes on the legislature as they do things like work all night into the early morning of the next day to pass a budget. And so,
You know
as
what,
Kelly
Jacob? Before you get into small business support hubs, why don't, because you really love talking about this, and so I've kind of laid it out. Why don't you talk about the marathon session that was and how that played out? And I will leave that to you because you just love it so much.
Yes. So, well, I think, elected officials get a bad rap, like they don't, what are they doing? They're not doing anything. And, they are on a good day in session, maybe 3 days a week. They're in district other days doing other obligations, of course. But one of the things about being a state legislator is that some days you have these marathon sessions. And so on Thursday, we were sort of buckled in. We were hearing around town that it was probably going to be a late night. And what a late night looks like in the legislative world is there's really no bounds. There could be as late as you could possibly fathom. So on Thursday, the legislators buckled in for the finalization of these negotiations, all the technical things that need to be done. Bills need to go over to legal to be drafted and need to go to policy so everyone can read through these 1,000-page documents before they vote on them. Um, and they don't usually have a lot of lead time between when they see them and when they have to vote on them. So it's a lot condensed into a very short period of time. But what ended up happening is they did this all day Thursday, into the night Thursday, and into the morning Friday. I think they wrapped up around, what was it, about 10 a.m. when they adjourned on Friday morning. And
Yes.
so after that, they were able to go back to their districts and start marching in parades on Friday and Saturday for the fourth weekend. But we definitely did get a lot of pictures of some legislators sleeping at their desks after this long marathon session. So, but of course, Kelly mentioned this is a multi-billion dollar behemoth. Most of this is used to fund the various functions of state government, but there's always a handful of line items that we pay particularly close attention to. And what Kelly was alluding to is how the state government supports small businesses. There's this line item that we keep track of, and it changes names just about every year based on what's headlining the priority list. But this year it was called the Michigan Small Business Community Growth and Entrepreneurship Support Fund. It was funded at about $68 million dollars, and it was broken into three chunks. And so I'm going to sort of talk about what the function is of this program and how it relates to small businesses. The biggest chunk of this $68 million dollars is a $30 million chunk for it's called a small business growth or the small business development portion of the fund. And this portion of the fund will be able to go towards promoting small business growth. They give a list of what this could include. It can include technical assistance to small businesses. It can include support to small business support hubs, support for community development financial institutions, or CDFIs, as it's often shortened to, or the department can provide direct grants, loans, or technical assistance direct to businesses. So this is an acknowledgement from the state that small business growth is worth investing in. It's in the state's interests and is a part of their economic development strategy. And most of what this has looked like for the past couple of years is support for the Small Business Support Hub program, which was included on that list. This is a program that was born out of COVID or sort of in the response to COVID. It was initially supported with some federal funds. Money went to different hubs throughout the state. And these hubs are organizations that provide direct hands-on training opportunities, support opportunities, education opportunities to small businesses. It was given about $11 million dollars in last year's budget too to continue funding those hubs. And the program's success really comes from these hubs. So instead of having to create programming whole cloth within the MEDC, the state, they don't want to be responsible for the outreach, curriculum, the programming. They figure it's a more efficient use of resources to grant this money out to the hubs that have the capacity and expertise to deliver services who, hubs have these relationships with businesses in their community, they're mission driven, and the state will take responsibility for the oversight and compliance portion, making sure everybody's in line, finding the best partners to make these hubs. So SBAM does operate a statewide hub through our foundation. We use it to provide training and education services to businesses. We are hopeful, given what I mentioned above, it's just an efficient use of resources, and Small Business Support Hub program is a demonstrated track record of success. We are hopeful that that piece will continue to get more funding as the main driver of this first bucket of funds, just because it does have that proven track record. The next two buckets are tangentially related to small businesses. Uh, the next bit is $28.5 million is set aside for community revitalization and business attraction. This is sort of like the more traditional, what you'd expect in economic development. It can be used for brownfield redevelopment, blight removal, site development, infrastructure projects, and supporting retaining retention efforts in businesses and supporting some business attraction too. So that's that second chunk. And the third one is set aside for sort of like high tech startups. This is separate from the innovation fund that passed a couple years back, mainly geared towards high tech startups, technical assistance, and then providing support to these incubators that support high tech startups. So in large, we're encouraged with the direction of the language. It seems to us like there's a concerted effort to explicitly include small business growth as a major piece of Michigan's economic development strategy. We'd still like for that to be like written in law more explicitly, but definitely some steps in the right direction. So I'm going to end it there. I'll kick it back to you, Kelli. Childcare, of course, is a huge topic of conversation, workforce development, and it was a big topic of conversation again during these budget negotiations. Can you talk about what happened there?
Yeah, some real good developments on the childcare front, which we stay in tune with. We obviously have a policy council within SBM that has providers that help lead this work. And so some major wins for them in this budget. One of the things that was talked about is the childcare scholarship, and the budget did maintain funding for the childcare scholarship program. It is based on enrollment. There was discussion amongst moving from enrollment to attendance, which is a little bit difficult for our childcare provider just based on consistency. We know kids get sick, people take vacations. So there's a little bit of influx there. It had been requested essentially from the Trump administration moving towards an attendance-based program, mainly because of a lot of the fraud that has been seen, specifically in Minnesota. What happened instead was that the three collective leaders and their teams came together and said, we will stick with the enrollment based. However, we want better metrics to track who is actually coming to the respective childcare providers or families that are utilizing this so that we can see absenteeism almost on the front end before maybe some kids even enter school. And so what happened was is that the legislature made an investment in the infrastructure through MyLeap to update their systems because childcare providers were having a lot of struggles with turning in those records because of the archaic system that they have to go through the state. This was actually something that our members had requested and that the department was in vast need of. And so we found that this collaboration and this negotiation that came to a head was a great development on all fronts. And we think that that is going to be really good for that program moving forward. A couple other pieces, the early learning partnerships for childcare is funding that is secured through the through supporting the next evolution of Great Start collaboration. And so that was a win for people that interface with that specific program. They put $21 million into supporting the early childhood workforce, which basically are programs that do the wage pilots that we've seen over time and other workforce strategies, and also things that we work on here at SBM like nurture benefits. This pool of money does have a direct allocation to that program that we've been able to offer this year. It also funds the Michigan Future Educator, which helps pull people into this specific field, whether it's early education as a teacher or an entrepreneur that might be going into childcare itself. And then the big one for us is we've always been a champion of Share, and this was actually a program of a collective group of people that met at SBAM, and it's a third, a third, a third. And so the state pays a third, the families pay a third, and then the employer pays a third. It's an opt-in. And essentially, what happened was not only was the program funded in totality this year, but there was boilerplate language put in to make this actual law. We had worked with Representative Van Workum's office and obviously the representative himself. He was the originator of the legislation. We had had a meeting with him about cementing this so that employers know that this is not a pilot anymore. It is something that they can lean into as a workforce development tool to offer to their employees if it makes sense. The state is the administrator of it. And so to see this move forward under, us being a major part of it was a huge success for us. And so we're so excited to see that flourish in the years to come. There's been a little nervousness about people engaging in the program because they didn't want to give this benefit to their employees and then have to yank it back because the funding would not be there as an appropriation. And so this was a major win for SBAM and our providers and obviously all the pieces that I touched on. It was a real good night into morning for childcare. There's a new fund that's also going to be created called Early Childhood Fund, and it's a fund that will make an initial $5 million investment in order to amplify and move these types of programs forward. And so we're excited to see what comes of that. Jacob, I'm going to turn it back over to you to talk about Reconnect and the Going Pro Talent Fund, which are workforce development tools we have supported from day one as well, and maybe how they came along together and offset each other a little bit.
Yes, so these two programs, we've supported them both for a long time. Reconnect, Michigan Reconnect is the program that reconnects adults without a post-secondary degree back to community college. Adults who are 25 years or older without a post-secondary degree or credential or equivalent credential are qualified for this program supported by the state to go back to community college. The Going Pro Talent Fund, on the other hand, is a workforce development program that reimburses employers for training and upskilling their employees. So we've always viewed this as, there are a lot of different tools that you can use to attack workforce development, and these are two that we've supported for a long time. And as Kelly mentioned, these two programs are sort of intertwined. In the past, it's sort of worked as like a this for that with legislators. Like, I'll support Going Pro if you support Reconnect or that sort of thing. So uh, for a while, they were funded at about the same level. They were both funded in the mid $50 million per year range. But we've seen a drop off in Going Pro in the last couple of years. In last year's budget, the program was cut down to, I think it was 31 million. The House initially wanted it removed from the budget altogether. And then in this year's budget, it was the governor who kept the program out of her initial budget recommendation. And it was the House that fought for its inclusion in this year's budget. So its inclusion this year is at a significantly lower rate. It's only at about $14.5 million. So there will be funding available for Going Pro this year, but the cycles this time around are going to be a lot more selective than they have been in years past. I'm curious to know if they do two cycles this time or if it's just the one. They did two this most recent, even with reduced funding. And we know that even when the program was being funded in the $50 million a year range, there were still qualified applicants that were being turned away. So it's definitely going to be a lot more competitive now than it was before. Now, Reconnect, on the other hand, just got a $25 million a year bump, and this extra funding is going to be used to permanently lower the eligibility age from that 25 that I mentioned earlier to 21. So if you're 21, graduated high school, or you have a GED but no post-secondary, you may apply for Reconnect. So one of the state's workforce development goals, one of the goals that we've supported is 60 by 30, to get 60% of Michigan's workforce a post-secondary degree or equivalent credit by 2030, and both of these help us get closer to that. So staying with that theme, Kelly, I'm going to kick it back to you to talk a little bit more about education and what was done on the K-12 front.
Yeah, the governor's made it clear that education has been one of her very top priorities, and I would say the legislature in general has gone along with that, maybe with some guardrails. So, 325 million to support school operations is a 2.5% increase in base per pupil funding, and that's additional $250 per student. The total per pupil allotment will total $10,300. It's the highest that it's ever been. I think people still argue that's not enough, but we know that money doesn't always follow results. So, a few things though from the governor's State of the State address that happened in February. A big focus of hers was literacy, and so there was a $502 million allotment towards literacy. There's a couple different things that I'll say feed up into that. Pre-K for all is going to be a continued push, $96.1 million towards that, the largest to date. 135 million to support students and parents for before and after school programming. We know sometimes parents have to go to school or go to work ahead of school starting, and so the pre and post time for kids to have supports is important and has been important to the governor. 50 million for tutoring purposes. We know that Michigan is really faltering in the literacy and the education standpoint, coming in at 44th out of 50 in the United States. 50 million to provide grants to school districts, helping them purchase and implement high quality literacy programs. 75 million to continue implementing letters training, which has been also known as the science of reading. It's focused on phonics and a return to that. We support that as well as within the launch framework that we support in education reform. 33 million to fund regional supports for families. 10.5 million to hire additional literacy coaches. That is going from supporting 420 coaches across the state. That's an increase of 327 coaches since this has been implemented. And then 9.6 million to support adult education, and 7.6 million through literacy essentials, which is basically supports for teachers to get up to date on the science of reading and letters. Couple other things with education. There was a move towards weighted funding, which is basically a formula that school districts receive extra money on top of the standard per pupil funding as a percentage increase for students with higher needs. It does shift Michigan's approach to direct additional state funding where it is most required, which will be good to see kids that need extra support get that. Dual enrollment, $40 million to reimburse eligible districts for dual enrollment costs. It's to incentivize districts to obviously have kids gain college credit while they're in high school rather than paying for it when they're out. Out of school time programming, we know kids do better when they have routine. There are some parents that need extra support in the summer. This is for like day camps, maybe more extra supports in the summer for schools. And then also the inclusion and intent language around special education funding was included in education. So a big education bucket this year. Jacob, as we close out this piece of our program, let's talk about maybe some things that are quick hits in the budget that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, so just as we sort of wrap up this conversation, there was a continuation. $200 million was allocated to continue the free school lunch meal program for school kids. And that includes breakfast as well. There is a continuation of the Working Families Tax Credit, which we supported when it first came into law in 2023. The no state tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, so a state level expansion of what was done on the federal level with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act will continue on the state level for as long as it does on the federal level. There was also $2.2 billion that goes towards universities and colleges to advance Michigan's 60 by 30 goal, as I mentioned earlier. And then also sticking with the theme from earlier is the revitalization of the transformational brownfield program.
Helps if I take myself off mute still, friends, after all this time. I think I'm just going to round out our budget conversation, Jacob, because I really want to touch base on something you've been working really hard on, which is the association health plan legislation that had passed a few weeks ago now, which is hard to believe. Some people have saw policy bills that moved alongside the budget, and they have been asking, why those and not ours or something to that effect. So maybe can you talk about or interweave that policy bills that may have moved forward during the budget process that had, essentially nothing to do with it. But what's to expect of our association health plan legislation in maybe the weeks and months to come?
Yes, so there were some things that moved alongside the budget. There was a list that was floating around of like a dozen, 2 dozen different policy bills. A lot of those bills were sort of implementing some of the pieces of the budget in statute, but association health plans, our bill was not included in that list. There were some other things that were sort of discussed, like, oh, maybe a property tax cut will be included in the budget. We had talked about that on this program. That didn't end up crossing the finish line. Just seemed like maybe there needs to be more work on that before it's ready for prime time. Didn't have full buy-in in both chambers. Same with the hospital bills that we talked about on this program as well, would create a regulatory body overseeing hospitals. Still needs to be some more work done and some more buy-in from legislators before that's done. Now, shifting over to our association health plan bill, Brian just talked about that. That bill, of course, passed the Senate 35-0. We were very happy to see that. And it now moves towards the House for future consideration. We've had, as Kelly mentioned, people reaching out to us asking, what can we do? Can we start to reach out uh, to our elected officials in the House and try and encourage them to bring this up? Um, I will say that for us at SBAM, we've been talking so much about health insurance. It's been such a huge issue for employers. It's become an issue for us as well. And so you can rest assured that this is going to be at the top of our list of concerns for the rest of this year, 2026. It was not included in the budget conversations. It wasn't ready yet. It just passed the Senate, and we still have work to do in the House. But when it is time to reach out to House members and try and encourage them to bring up this helpful piece of legislation, we will be reaching out and maybe asking you to encourage your legislators as well, as we experienced a lot of success with that when we did so with the Senate.
Well, thanks, Jacob, for joining Sarah and I today. It's always nice to have a friend to bounce all this information off of. It's a lot to take in, and they will see both of us, obviously, our crew around here.
Thanks for having me.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you both. You did a really great job in boiling it all down for those of us who weren't sweating the details. So appreciate your insights. All right, we have a few minutes left of the show, and so Kelly, it really wouldn't be a show lately without Election Watch 2026 and some big news that happened in the U.S. Senate race last night.
Yes, I will keep this brief so we can close out our show on time. But with everything that happened with the budget on the second and third, what happened yesterday is State Senator Mallory McMorrow, she did drop out of the U.S. Senate race, which leaves Congresswoman Haley Stevens and Abdul El Sayed, the last two standing in the Democrat primary in August. And so what happens is this race drastically shifts. Where do the McMorrow voters go? Do they vote for El Sayed? Do they go with Haley Stevens? It will make a difference in, countrywide money that is coming into Michigan. McMorrow declined to support one or the other. She said she will support who comes out of the Dem primary. And so this will be a very interesting race from now until the August primary. And then, Sarah, what I'll do is just round out election 2026, even with the gubernatorial. There's obviously on the Democrat side kind of a coronation with Secretary Benson, but what we can see is that Sheriff Swanson from Genesee County is not going away quietly. He got a notable endorsement from Jelly Roll, the singer, over the weekend. A very pop culture focused endorsement, much like Kid Rock engages sometimes in these types of races. But also, he's been picking up endorsements here and there from various unions across the state that he is spending time with, very present on social media. And so I'll just say, even though there may be this assumption that Secretary Benson is going to win that primary, Sheriff Swanson is still, trying to sway voters. He picked up a major endorsement via a news publication as well. And then on the Republican side, there's a lot of conflict between the last three standing, if you will, between Perry Johnson, Congressman James, and former Attorney General Mike Cox. They have some debates coming up this week. And so if you're interested in that, make sure you tune in. But it's getting pretty ugly over there. Lots of, not so nice verbiage about each other. And so you'll have to make some decisions as you approach the August ballot where you want to place your support. But please do make sure that you do your due diligence in finding out who these candidates are. And obviously, our Small Biz PAC will be watching and weighing in when appropriate as well. So, Sarah, close us out.
All right. Yeah, just a couple of quick reminders. It is now officially July, and we have 3 amazing owner-to-owner events scheduled. The first is coming up this Thursday in Lansing with our capital region. We're headed to Great Lakes Bay on July 23rd and Wayne County on the 28th. Details sbam.org/events. Thanks for tuning in. We hope you have a great week, and we will be back here next Monday at 3 o'clock.
Have a great week.